one thing that we know for sure, here we can really hang our hat on something, is that if you do the forensics on somebody that was suicidal, attempted, or took their life, in the preceding days and weeks, their sleep-wake schedule was completely whacked. They exit the normal routine of most people. They isolate through inversions of time. And I do wonder sometimes whether or not the vampire shifts, as they're sometimes called, the nighttime deployments and the back and forth, I mean, that's a lot for a system to take. Shift workers kill themselves far more than non-shift workers. So I do think there's something there. And again, I'm not saying everyone needs to be in bed by 9 and up by 4, and although that would be a great schedule for most people. But I do think that there are some universal laws of what makes the human body and brain healthy. And if you violate those laws long enough, with CTE or with disruption in your schedules, you run the risk, especially if there's a predisposition there, and then other factors start to layer in. Again, I have to apologize because I don't have any real answers or more biology or psychology to firmly throw at this, except the warning for people who are bipolar or know somebody with bipolar. They are 20 to 30 times more likely to kill themselves, and males in particular are more likely to use methods that will kill them the first time as opposed to survive. There's a big sex difference there.
You throw alcohol in there too, and Marcus is running an organization now where they're taking vets down to do the psychedelic, what they call it, a journey.
This is Veteran Solutions.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, they're a great organization.
Yep.
And I should mention, very bipartisan organization. I attended one event on Coronado, and there were people from the far left, the far right, politicians, and everything in between talking about how critical this is. So this is not a political issue. This is a mental health issue. Yeah,
and even when I reflected on Marcus talking to me, he was talking about how he's kind of in this downward spiral. Part of the downward spiral, he was drinking every day. And I'm thinking to myself, man, like, I didn't think of it during the show. I kind of was thinking about it afterwards. I was thinking, man, like, if you're drinking all the time, you're on a downward spiral. Like, that's one thing you should just stop. Let's stop that immediately. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I think when that's another sign from the outside looking in, if someone's self-medicating with alcohol, it's not a good place. Not a good place. They're not in a good place, and they could probably use some help.
I appreciate you saying it. Again, we did this episode on alcohol. I went into it totally open-minded. I've never been a big drinker. I've had it. I can drink or not drink. Was never really into drugs at all. Dabbled a little bit when I was younger. I regret it, frankly. Brain is plastic early on. I didn't need that. Never did hard drugs. Never touched cocaine, amphetamine, or anything like that. So, and if I had, I would say, right, I'm comfortable enough in my position in life that if I had, I'd certainly say. But I think that it's pretty clear that alcohol is bad for us. It's certainly past a certain, 2-drink a week limit. People, especially with a propensity for alcoholism or who are dealing with other issues. That's especially the case for not drinking, right? And I guess, we got into some hard territory here, but I think if this conversation cues up an awareness to anybody, which I hope it would, either people that are in that space of wondering if they should continue or not, or that know somebody who might be, I do think that the takeaway is very clear, which is that, there are ways to avoid these traps and to avoid making these traps worse. And I think regular sleep-wake schedules, understanding that, and I wrote this down, that, you in particular, I've said several times today, rather than looking for sources of things outside you, like a job or a relationship, which are all great, but as sources of energy or motivation or inspiration, to use action as a positive action as a source of energy, I think is if I could like put that up on a billboard in Times Square, I would, right? And I put your name next to it, which is that positive action is a source of energy that then you can recycle into more things. I think going back to the fundamentals, right?
Yeah, and positive action is when you have to contend with something, when there's something that you're afraid of, right? Step into it, move towards it. That's how you're going to solve that problem. You don't solve problems by running away from them. You solve them by moving towards them and figuring out what's going on. And I mean, alcohol is obviously a clear way to avoid the problem, at least for the next 4 hours. And you wake up and that problem's still there, and that's not good. But when you've got some kind of a problem, and listen, then we could go down the whole path of talking about the indirect approach, which is a theory of combat, which I completely believe in, but it also applies to, interacting with other people. If you have a problem with some other person, to think to yourself, well, I got a problem with Andrew, I'm going to go confront him on it. And that might not be the best solution. In fact, it's probably not the best solution for me to go confront you with the problem, because now we're going to have a confrontation. It might be better for me to take an indirect approach and not confront you, but instead engage in a conversation with you about something that's maybe adjacent to the problem that I have. And then eventually that builds our relationship to a point where you start to recognize, oh, I bet Jocko feels something about this thing, and we can move towards a solution instead of me trying to punch you in the face with some truth that I believe versus the truth that you believe. And now we're engaged in combat, and that's bad. There's going to be casualties. I'd rather take an indirect approach and build a relationship where we can solve problems in a more positive way.
I love that. And I love it because it really speaks to the power of thinking carefully and being patient and a little bit slower at times.